Politics, and I call on Deputy Marylou McDonald, please.
Taoiseach, last week, two things happened in the world of high finance which caused understandable public outrage. First came the announcement that your government will allow again the payment of outrageous bonuses to elite staff at AIB, a bank bailed out by the Irish people, you will recall. And then we had the news that 16 employees at Davy, many of them senior executives, had broken the rules, broken the regulations for personal financial gain. The toxic culture that brought this country to its knees a decade ago, it seems, is truly alive and well. And people now ask themselves correctly, are we back to the beginning? Here we go again. Let's look at the facts, Taoiseach. This Davy scam was uncovered in 2014. It's taken 6 years to get to this point, and still no individuals have been held to account. Those who are responsible continue to play a dominant role in the financial sector throughout those 6 years. Tá bank ceannaigh glur cuaigtí breise ionas gur féidir leo déileáil seo le breis is 3 bliana anuas. Ach ní rinne Fine Gael nó an rialtas aon rud chun freagra a thabhairt ar na gléanna seo. The Minister promised legislation to allow senior executives to be held to account before summer 2019. We're 2 years on and still nothing. And let's face it, Taoiseach, this recent scandal is not an isolated event. Look at the tracker mortgage issue. That impacted on 40,000 people, and yet nobody held to account. And perhaps there's little wonder at that when you consider the revolving door between the financial industry and politics, a door that just keeps on spinning, where we see ministers of state seamlessly move from politics to jobs in high finance. One day, their job is to hold the financial industry to account, and the next day, they are in fighting the corner of that industry as lobbyists. Indeed, it's only when a record fine was issued by the central bank against Davies last week that things moved on a little bit. And it was only public anger that brought about resignations at Davy. At the weekend, we had called on the NTMA to drop Davy as the primary dealer in Irish government bonds, and I welcome that that has happened. But this decision and the fine are corporate sanctions. Not a single individual from the 16 executives has been held to account. Minister O'Donoghue said yesterday that all those responsible have left the firm, but that's not really accurate. They have left one cog in the corporate structure, but they remain directors in key parts of the overarching organisation. Taoiseach, last week you told the Dáil that the fine would impact on behaviour in the financial sector. I want to ask, do you still hold that view, given that the central bank has stated and set out how Davy frustrated its investigation at every turn? We still don't yet know who most of the 16 rule breakers are, and I'm not asking you to name them, Taoiseach, but we do need to know where they are now, where they work now. Do any of those involved hold positions in government departments or in banks in which the state has a stake? Do you know, Taoiseach? Have you looked into this? Can you tell the Dáil what legal consequences those involved will face?
Thank
you,
Do you Deputy.
Accept that they should be independently investigated? And Taoiseach, finally, for years your Taoiseach and Finance Minister have sat on legislation to hold individual financial rule breakers to account. Please. This has to end, and will you commit to enacting such legislation?
Thank you very much. Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, could I say that in relation to Davies, and I thank the Deputy for raising what is a very important issue, and the behaviour by the Davy executives was absolutely unacceptable, and I think reveals an appalling culture of greed and has damaged the reputation of the financial services sector in this country. Executives in business or in the financial services should never put personal gain above their duties and responsibilities. And I think the NTMA made the right decision in relation to its relationship with Davies in severing that in respect of the issuing of bonds. And I would say in the context of the NTMA decision, that's exactly the consequence that I had in mind when I made my comments, because a central bank investigation will have an impact. But it's absolutely unacceptable that since, first of all, that this has been ongoing since 2014 and that the executives sought to frustrate the efforts of the central bank and of the regulator to get to the truth of this issue and to bring this issue to a conclusion. So I agree with the NTMA in terms of withdrawing Davies' authority to act as a primary dealer for the Irish government bonds. That was the correct decision, and the NTMA will no longer be doing business with Davies. And on the issue of individual accountability, the central bank does have extensive powers to sanction individuals who are involved in the management of financial services firms and who breach financial services legislation. That said, we do believe that the existing financial legal framework to hold individuals responsible for their behaviour needs to be strengthened, and in the programme for government, provision has been made for the introduction of legislation in relation to senior executive accountability regime, SEER, to deliver heightened accountability in the financial sector. And government will be publishing the heads of that bill soon, and that in itself will drive further positive changes in terms of culture in the financial services industry and enhanced accountability, whilst simplifying the taking of sanctions against individuals who fail in their financial sector roles. In respect of Davy has said it no longer employs any of the 16 involved in that 2014 transaction, and that it will appoint a third party imminently to conduct a review of the findings of the central bank. Clearly now, Davies has an awful lot of work to do to rebuild public trust. I think you've made it, your party is making a point about strengthening regulation, and I would agree with that. But you yourself, I think, need to practice that as well. You've been unwilling to answer questions about the party's own financial culture. You accepted, you're the wealthiest political party in this country, you've accepted a €4 million donation from the estate of Englishman William Hampden into the party's accounts in the north of Ireland, when it was bequeathed to Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland. And this donation is more than 1,600 times, the maximum affordable donation under Irish electoral law. But that was a shady enough transaction, Deputy, to make even a stockbroker blush. And I think, these are issues that you need to deal with too when we're talking about the wider financial probity and accountability. And Shannon Airden has spoken in relation to that. In relation to further actions in terms of Davy, the OED it's open to the ODCE to become involved here, and also potentially other bodies as well. I don't want to prejudice further developments in relation to either the individuals concerned or this issue in terms of any further investigations that might or might not take place. And obviously that's a matter in the first instance for the Director of Corporate Enforcement. But we are committed in the programme for government to the introduction of a senior executive accountability regime.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And I would say that over the last decade alone, there have been 100 pieces of legislation, regulation, introduced to underpin and strengthen the regulatory framework insofar as it pertains to financial regulation. Culture is here. The culture has been one of unacceptable greed, manifested in this deed, which I
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. Deputy McDonald.
Anyone who had hoped that the toxic culture of greed and personal gain had been banished from financial services, from the upper echelons, the elites of financial services, had their eyes opened again last week. Davies have made it very clear that that culture is alive and well. And anyone who imagined that the culture of acquiescence in all of that from Fianna Fáil and successive governments, that had been banished, has their eyes opened by the Taoiseach's response here this afternoon. See, the fact is that this behaviour has been acceptable to successive governments. That's why it has happened time and time again. That's why there is, as we speak, no mechanism, as called for by the central bank, to hold senior executives to account. And it seems now only when the pressure comes on you, Taoiseach, will you concede that that is necessary. Where are these wrongdoers?
Thank you, Deputy.
Do they work in banks? Do they work in government departments? And will you join me, Taoiseach, in stating very clearly that Davy bringing in a third party to carry out an investigation into these matters is wholly unacceptable,
Thank you, Deputy.
wholly
Time is up.
insufficient, and that it ought to be the central bank that sets the terms for such an investigation and that oversees it. We need full transparency here.
Taoiseach.
We absolutely do. And there is no acquiescence. This government is in office 9 months. The government made it very clearly in the programme for government that it was going to introduce legislation to strengthen this area, particularly in terms of accountability for senior executives within the financial regime and in the financial area. And that will happen, and the heads of bill are being prepared in that regard. And look, Deputy, your party cozies up to high finance as well. There's only one party here now at this stage that travels the world, cozying up to high finance and big construction companies raising funding and so on. So you're eager to brand other parties in relation to this. We haven't been in power for 10 years. We've come into office now with other parties in respect of this government about 9 months ago. Those are the facts. The bottom line is this: you do cozy up in the United States and elsewhere to high finance when it suits you, and you sell a different story there and tell a different story there. And likewise, in terms of accountability in respect of issues pertaining to financial propriety in the north and so on, like that, you tell a different story and you don't deal with it, you don't account for it. But you can be absolutely sure nobody in government, no one in government, in any shape or form, everyone in government condemns what has happened here, and we're absolutely determined that the proper regulators deal with it in as effective and as strong a manner as they possibly can.